As long as there have been bullhorns, there have been boycotts. But social media really changed the scope and velocity of protests that target TV and radio advertisers. This tactic, as we now know it, really came of age beginning in 2012 when Rush Limbaugh insulted Sandra Fluke. And ever since, cable news and radio talkers have learned the hard way to choose their words carefully. Or have they? And with bullhorns outside that Philadelphia Starbucks store and that company in damage control, will they too suffer? Let's ask Michael Harrison, the publisher of Talkers Magazine. Michael, welcome back to The Big Picture.
Great to be with you, Holland. Thank you very much.
Laura Ingraham has lost, at last count, 27 sponsors since she dissed Parkland school shooting survivor David Hogg. And Sean Hannity, who has been targeted by and survived several advertising boycotts, has caught heat for defending the president's lawyer without disclosing that he, too, is a client. Then came this Starbucks thing in Philadelphia. What are talk radio callers telling you about the boycott as a protest tactic?
Well, the callers don't like the boycotts because the callers are listeners, and they're very, very active listeners. They like what they're listening to. So they're not the complainers. Most of the people who complain about what's said in talk media, and controversial political talk media especially, are people that don't listen to it or don't watch it on television, but they hear about it on other platforms that in many cases are critical of the program that's being contested. So the callers are very supportive. It's the larger audience out there that hears it secondhand and then says, oh yeah, they should be taken off the air.
The hosts themselves who are boycotted allude to it on the air. Are the callers that you talk to and the callers you hear on the shows impacted vocal about that on the air? Do they speak in defense of the host?
They do speak in defense of the host. We're in an era right now where talk media tends to preach to the choir, that the debate type of a program, the general type of a talk program where you have an audience of liberals and conservatives, Democrats, Republicans, moderates, that doesn't exist anymore. The targeting of audiences has created like-mindedness in terms of each universe, each bubble. So the callers are against anything that, threatens the platform that they love.
A thought leader in an industry fueled by partisan rhetoric, yet just as consistently you have criticized boycotts as stifling free speech. Now, it's not a First Amendment issue.
I do.
It's not a First Amendment issue because the boycotters aren't the government, but are not the boycotters themselves exercising free speech by flexing the free marketplace?
This is a very interesting aspect of the First Amendment, and most people only understand it to a point, and that point is where they don't agree with something.
Right.
The First Amendment guarantees you not to be censored by the government, with a few limitations here and there, but basically the First Amendment gives you free speech separate from government control and government censorship. It doesn't provide you with a soapbox, and it doesn't guarantee that other people can't express their free speech rights in protest of what you've said. So the boycotts are a form of free speech. However, because commercial media today is so dependent on advertising revenue as its lifeblood, it may not be an infringement of the letter of the First Amendment, but it certainly is an infringement of the spirit of the First Amendment. It's hitting below the belt. It's gouging the guy in the eye when the referee isn't looking. And it's part of the game, but it's playing very dirty, and it does threaten free speech in America because so many of our vehicles of free speech are dependent upon advertising.
How do you grade Starbucks' response, and what can media talkers learn from how they're handling this?
Well, Kevin Johnson, who is the CEO of Starbucks, he's performing as if he's from Central Casting. I mean, he is just emotional. He is completely owns this this issue and seems extremely sensitive to the problem and determined to solve it. However, Starbucks had a policy that you can't use the bathroom unless you buy something, and we see this everywhere, all across the country in many restaurants where they run the risk of having people coming off the street and using their restroom. So it was posted. So the problem with this story as it's being depicted in the media, and callers and commentators alike are saying, what was said? What part of this story don't we know? There's a whole missing component to this story, unless, you know, since the time I came in this studio, something is broken. So this is one of those stories that we're talking about racism. We're talking about how African Americans are treated in public restaurants and public places, but we don't specifically know what happened at Starbucks. So it's almost as if Starbucks is reacting to something that we don't know whether they did anything wrong. Even the police department, the police spokesperson or chief is an African American. This is a very murky issue, and I personally think it's going to fade. I don't think that Starbucks is going to have a crisis for very long.
Thank you, as always, Michael Harrison, publisher of Talkers Magazine.
Thank you.